all of the innovation that we've had pertaining to innovation in FinTech, right? It's all the more evident in the B2B space. When we talk about how FinTechs are leveraging technology to make lives of founders, business owners, and disruptors seamless going forward, right? And it's not just Razorpay, right? We work along with a bunch of amazing partners to see this happening. Right from founders incorporating their companies to all the way to ensuring their employees have a fabulous experience, their vendors have a fabulous experience, and of course, that their customers enjoy and truly are delighted by them, right? This ingenuity is best shown in the Indian fintech ecosystem, where sectors like insurtech, payments are getting disrupted at a rate that has not been seen anywhere else in the world. And who better to talk about this than the industry stalwarts we have here with us today? I'd like to call upon on stage Rajeev Ahuja, Executive Director at RBL. Please welcome, sir. Round of applause, please, gentlemen. Abhishek Poddar, co-founder and CEO at Plum. Welcome, Abhishek. Archit Gupta, founder and CEO of Clear. And Satrajit Sengupta, Head of Implementation at SAP Concur, India. And who better to moderate this panel than our very own Ayush Bansal, VP and GM of Razorpay X. Over to you, Ayush.
Hello, everyone. Hi. I can see some low energy. I think you folks are thinking that we are standing between you and your lunch. But hopefully we'll give you some other food for thoughts after this session, till the session. Couple of things before I start the session. I think we are all pretty active now after all the regulators like being active in this space and for the right reasons. So we'll cover that as one of the topics for the day. We had AI as one of the topics which was covered in the last session, and we'll continue on the AI wave also and talk about that, what is happening in the AI in the fintech. So we have a bunch of topics to cover today. I'll jump right in, right? My first question is to you, Rajeev, right? So Rajeev, at RBL, I think RBL is one of the pioneer banks in this space, and over the years you have built multiple different business lines, and your asset liability, all these books are just scaling every year. I wanted to, there's a perception that banks are a little slow to innovate, right? Sorry? There's a perception that banks are slow to innovate, right? But we work with banks all the time. RBL is one of our, we are one of our RBL's partner, and we know that perception is not true. So I wanted to know from you on the innovation as a theme that what is RBL doing and what is bank up to?
Hi. Thanks, Ayush, and first of all, amazing show. I mean, it's a fabulous scale.
Thank you.
And couldn't come at a better time just to revalidate the importance many of you have created for the financial services industry. So kudos. So Ayush, two things. One is I'd like the perception to be there, okay? So that, it's important that we are taken seriously in a different way. Secondly, innovation is a very ambitious word for banks. We should really focus on how we can, improve our capability, capacity, because we are, frankly, the last line of defense for many of you and the regulator, because a lot of the flows go through our engines. Secondly, providing the sanctity of what's happening. You heard the last comment on the digital data protection is going to impact banks, and we are being held to a very high standard. Third, I think where we can do a far better job, and which I hope we've demonstrated through our partnership with you, Ayush, is to see how we can combine and recombine various services to address a very different need. So I'll just take a minute and tell you what we're doing in business finance. Again, I think the learnings of the consumer finance or consumer banking are very relevant for business finance, and I think the opportunity is far larger because that entire journey is broken. And many of the businesses are not your large businesses who have teams of people doing accounting and finance. They are one-person shops or a small office. How do you reach them in a fashion which is cheaper? How do you monitor your business with them, whether it's an account opening or lending? So what we've done is one is we have this partnership with you on Razorpay X. The other is that we work very closely with some exchanges on threads. And again, threads is, this is an innovation of the RBI to actually bring a lot of MSMEs of various sizes onto a platform to leverage their contractual relationships with very large anchors who are far better known. And it's also creating not just a data stream through GST, acrylic, etc., but also transactional understanding. So supply chain. So we've taken it now, not just the anchor level, we've taken what they call the S1 level, which is the larger one, and now we're going to the S2. So we ran a sandbox a year ago with one of the exchanges and under RBI. It was successful. Now we're taking it to the next level, and that can be taken international as well. So in a lot of ways, it does need collaboration of people who are looking at this opportunity from different lenses. And I think the whole datafication of small businesses already commenced a few years back. COVID actually brought them to the forefront. And now it's a question. So interestingly, selfishly, if whatever can help us reduce our go-to-market OpEx and on a continuous basis get us access to data to know the health of our client is something which will help us innovate in our business model.
Got it. Awesome. I think good to know that framework, and I think I really admire how much you invest in the partnerships as a part of the scale, and I think that enables fintechs like us to partner with you deeply. I just want to go to Satrajit next, and SAP is a very known and established players, right? In the ERP space, you do multiple different innovation, right? If I have to just put down a few examples, you do it at a global level, at an India level, right? What are some of the trends which are happening in India that you are seeing, and what are some of the innovations, if you want to talk about them for the audience? Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I look at SAP as a company in India, we operate with essentially two large target audiences. One is this companies which has possibly 50% of the customers in US. There's not so much difference between how they operate in India and how they operate outside India. And then there is another set of companies who are growing, I think, amazingly fast. And their speed of innovation is at times faster than what we deliver. So there, I think the main, when we come in as an enterprise service provider, in the past we have been in a more consultative mode and saying that, what do you want? But through our experience and through the journey of cloud, we have learned, I think, going in with a very open-minded discussion sometimes does not deliver the right experience in the end. So we are nowadays going with a more prescriptive approach, if you may say so, and say that, look, I understand your needs. We have also worked in this market, in this industry, in some of the other markets, and this is how we see the problem. And then whatever is, let's say, the delta, that we solve through partnerships. The core, we do not try to kind of overcomplicate and make it very difficult for you to sustain. Whatever is on the peripherals which is needed for India in terms of volume. Volume is one of the things which you see in India and China, which you don't see in some of the Western markets. So these are the broad differences that we see.
Got it. So partnerships and investment in the technology, that's, I think, it's a theme that, and we'll speak about partnerships a little bit later also. I want to come back on that. But let me just come to Archit also, right? So Archit, Clear is synonymous with tax payment, GST payment, CA network community in India, right? And over the last few years, you have, and a decade, you have built multiple products for this community, right? But over the last couple of years, there's an intent to go global. I just want to pick on that and understand this a little bit. What are the trends you are seeing in the global markets versus India markets? Yeah.
Right. So as a company, we started very similar DNA to Razorpay, very focused on Indian customers, India, and contrary to popular wisdom, building SaaS for India, right? And especially building for enterprises, businesses of India, small, medium, large, very large, and so on and so forth. And I think, frankly, we got to the global path, and many fintechs and many SaaS companies here will think about that, which path to choose, because there's a well-trodden path of launching global first, and very few success stories of India product and then taking it global. So especially in the technology space. But in our case, it was organic. I'll explain what that means. We built for India, and when GST came, when electronic invoicing in India came, we recognized the regulatory opportunity, and we started building software. And then we kept building it, kept refining it for India. And we kept refining it for very large businesses, public companies, small businesses, medium-sized businesses. And then when we looked up, we got surprised by the fact that across all nations of the world, other than maybe the US, the technology that we had built is highly resonant, and it's the same regulation coming all across the world. So the regulation sort of became our friend, that it's the same regulation across the world for businesses, forcing businesses to change, and enterprise businesses generally don't want to change. It's more of the same. And the regulation, like just the previous panel talked about, privacy, government regulations make businesses adopt to change. And that is when we were able to take our technology to the Middle East, Southeast Asia now, and more countries. And we're just now thinking Europe in a couple of years. And so overall, what was fascinating to us was India is such a large and rich playground. And as Satrajit said, like, India has massive scale. So when we go to any other country, we find it very easy to manage the scale. Like, our systems are battle tested to 100x volume sometimes to the largest enterprises over there. So we find it very easy. Second is the data APIs, the contracts, the API contracts, which the Indian government, the massive scale, the India digitization, India stack, the thought process is very rich. And so when we go to the other countries and we talk to the Ministry of Finance or the regulators over there, we are actually far ahead. We have seen this movie play out for the 5 years of operating in India in the B2B space. And then we can go tell them this is how the movie will play out. And we have reached a scale where we serve the government of India with technology. We've reached a scale where then we go to the other governments globally and offer them our technology because that's the scale we deal with. So I think India has been like very lovely as a playground to build on, to learn, and then taking the technology global. It's a very unique pathway. There are not many companies, but we are enjoying that journey. It's very organic.
Awesome. Just to understand this a little bit more, right? Like, this is the Indian customers who have multi-geography presence, or this is like their respective customers that you're targeting?
I think, great question. So it's not just Indian MNCs. We do have a lot of Indian MNCs, and we do serve them in many countries, but these are like native, like let's say we are present in Saudi and UAE, native Saudi companies, native UAE companies, native Malaysian companies. So very, very like core companies in those geographies, like schools, banks, railway systems, like very traditional companies of that environment as well, petroleum companies, what have you.
Awesome. This is great. I think good to learn that Indian regulations are also sort of leading the chart and are replicable in other geographies. This is great to learn.
And India's digital roadmap is far ahead of the world. So the interesting opportunity for entrepreneurs, perhaps in this room, is wherever the Indian digitization roadmap matches some of the world's common wisdom, I think then like you can sort of take your technology global also.
Interesting, interesting. I'll come to you, Abhishek, right? When we talk about innovation, right, I have to use the current buzzword AI, right? Like, so what are you doing on the AI, right? InsurTech, what is happening in AI? Just can you give us, like, enlighten us around that?
Yeah, I think a lot of fancy ideas come on the internet. We are a bit more practical about AI. We think of AI in terms of 3 buckets. So to give you context, we are building Plum. Plum is in the business of employee insurance and employee benefits. We put every ideas into 3 buckets. One is, can AI help in terms of improving the employee experience, the HR experience? So eventually, whoever our customer is, can AI improve their experience? So for example, we are, one of our core job is to make claims faster and more accurate. Can we use AI to read the documentation that you submit and see, hey, is the documentation complete? Is the documentation accurate? And what is the amount that you asked as a reimbursement versus the documentation that you submitted? So instead of a person picking it up in 1 to 2 days, that can be done in real time. So that's a small example of using AI to just speeden up the process, improve the experience. Number two bucket that we use AI is, can we improve the back-end processes that we have? So that comes in the bucket of cost efficiency. So for example, in the business of insurance, a lot of people still don't understand insurance, because of which a lot of companies, like one of the largest insurance companies in India, they have 10,000 people back-end team, call center team, which is very costly. And that doesn't really lead to great experience, but it is also very costly. So we are using AI that, hey, instead of getting someone on the call to help you understand the insurance, maybe AI can do a better job of explaining you what your insurance really means. Insurance generally is a 20, 30-page document, but typically a person needs one specific answer that, hey, I have this kind of surgery, will this be covered? And AI can read that 30-page document and give you a more accurate answer than probably a human, and I'm also saving back-end costs, right? So I put that as the second bucket. Everything that we think, hey, can we drive efficiency in addition to customer experience? Number three is one of the most costly things for all of us, I would believe, is engineering. Right? Engineering in any team is one of the, in any company is one of the most costly resources. So can we use AI to drive faster engineering? And you would see a lot of development that is happening is in terms of just the throughput of the engineers becoming 3x, 4x, 5x. So which means that, I think you were mentioning that, hey, you have 55 product launches today, right? How can a small organization with just 50 people can have that velocity of product launches, right? So those are three buckets in which we think of AI.
Interesting. I think great to know the trends. But in the insurance space overall, right, do you think AI is going to make big leaps and bounds, and what kind of patterns you see over the period of next 5 years or 10 years?
So I think broadly two patterns that I see. So one is in terms of just claim processing. A lot of claims processing, not a lot, 99% of the claims processing today is human driven. Someone is getting discharged from the hospital. The patient is waiting. Their spouse or their parent is waiting at the discharge for 2 hours, 3 hours, just to get the insurance and the hospital to talk to each other and agree that, hey, this is the amount that needs to be paid. I firmly believe that, and those 2-3 hours are very critical because someone needs to go back home. I think those are some of the experiences that will completely go away. And that's one of the mission that we have built, which is, hey, when you're getting discharged from the hospital, you just walk out. You should not wait for even a single minute. When you're trying to get reimbursement, it takes 30 days. Why should it take 30 days? Can that be done in an hour or maybe in minutes, right? So I think one area is just how, in the business of insurance, claims is one of the core areas that insurance companies need to build. So how can that really have a step jump compared to what we have rather than incremental jumps? Second piece in the business of insurance, when you're building insurance, is how do you underwrite? And underwriting essentially is two parts, which is, one is selection of risk, second is pricing the risk. I think a lot of us touched on data, which is, hey, we just need lots of data, but I think we already have a lots of data, but we are not using data enough right now in terms of both risk selection and pricing the risk. And I think that's one area where AI is going to play a big role. It has already started playing a big role in terms of risk selection right now, which is let's say, which person to deny, which person to accept, or which organizations to deny versus accept. But I think the next leap will be pricing the risk as well.
Got it. And one, maybe something I can think of without understanding the space is maybe capturing the frauds at a later point in time, like frauds in the claims and all, maybe that can be something.
Absolutely. So that comes in the first bucket of claims. See, the reason it takes so much of time to process a claim is they're trying to reduce fraud. So I think AI can obviously make it much faster, but I think your point is, hey, it can also do a better job of detection of the fraud as well.
No, I think good to know all the innovation which is happening in this space. I think we learned a lot on that. I just want to quickly shift gears and talk about regulations, right? And Rajeev, no better than you to educate us on that lines, right? So to talk about it's a big elephant in the room rather should I call it like it's a guiding light for all of us in terms of where we should be heading. So wanted to just understand from you, because you work with a lot of partnerships and fintechs, right? As a fintech, regulation, introduction of a regulation or something in the change that does disrupt some sort of a velocity, right? Like they'll always try to optimize for the speed, right? So it's a question of whether you want to optimize for the speed or you want to be a regulatory compliant first, right? So what is the framework that a fintech should be operating on according to you?
So I think, I mean, calling it an elephant in the room is perhaps the right metaphor, but at least you have to recognize that this is now real. And I think as if I go through my banking career, the principles haven't changed. I mean, the terminologies, today it's FinTech, yesterday was BC, and many other things. I think one has to be, first of all, very clear that anytime you're dealing with somebody's finances, much like insurance or tax, you have to have a very serious attitude towards your customer as well as for the system as a whole. I think the regulator hasn't changed its approach on these things for years, whether it's SEBI or IRDA or RBI. It's just that they're adapting to a speed, scale, complexity, which is very new. And it's also important to understand is that the person who actually is consuming your services, so let's yours, or even a bank in a FASTag, for instance, does not know what goes behind it and doesn't care and should not care. Can you bring down not bring down, but make your things so simple that, can you solve for that person if there's a disruption? So, in the recent weeks, people started getting concerned whether the FASTags would operate or not. I mean, now the guy who's driving a car need not have that concern, okay? Should not have that concern. So, meeting many of you over the last 10 years, I can say, I've been yesterday in Bangalore and today as well. The first thing people roll out is, what are we doing on compliance and governance and regulation? Because I think it's top of mind. But I can tell you that if you approach it with the fact that it has to meet not just the letter, but a smell test, a spirit test, you'll get it right. Nowhere is anybody saying you should not innovate, because ultimately consumer needs, merchant needs, business needs is what best you guys are solving. Using technology, using open protocols. And I think if you recognize that has to pass the test. And again, I don't think the regulator is saying it's a binary yes or no. So one thing, I can tell you safely is that all the regulators know that this is a dynamic thing, that just by putting it in black and white does not mean that issues don't arise externally. In fact, the person taking advantage of the financial services system is far more adaptive and good at leveraging all what you and I create, okay? What you need to have is an internal muscle to recognize threats, and somebody yesterday told me threat surface area, which I thought was a very nice way of putting it, because the threat surface area is evolving very fast. And so every time you build a product, you don't know what the outcome and implications are. Run it for a while before you scale it up, and therefore involve your partners, banks. In fact, I would encourage some of the larger fintechs to have an open line with the regulator, and the regulator actually having an open line with you, so that there's no surprise. What is critical is if you spot an issue, what corrections do you do? How do you document it? How do you share it with your partners and the regulator? And how do you keep that muscle strong? Because nowhere can we expect to have zero defects, ever, ever, ever. So I can tell you now, and I'm going to make this as something in your favor, that actually fintechs who get this religion can be far better at managing governance and compliance than banks can. Because you guys have this ability to connect internally far faster, both at a product risk, an ops level and a technology level. Banks are still dealing with multiple business divisions, technologies which don't talk to one another. So we have to create some artificial construct whenever there's a problem. And I can tell you, I'm dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. I wish I had the agility and the ability to get people together to tackle a problem the way you guys do for a business and now for risk management. So I think treat it like a very important part of your business. It also, as somebody said in the last thing, if you raise that standard, you also get a lot of good customers who will stick with you because they trust your brand.
So is it like safe to extrapolate that any fintech for that matter, right? At no matter at what scale they are at, even if they are starting today, they have to think about like regulation as an arm or like a team internally and keep learning about that muscle and keep building it.
Absolutely, Ayush. I don't think one should scrimp on that. In fact, I think we have been over the past 5-8 years learnt, and sometimes I've been politely told you're too conservative now. You used to be very open, democratic 10 years ago, and somewhere we've also learned along the way. And I think it's important to have that as a DNA. It doesn't mean you need to not innovate because otherwise you have no leg to stand on. But that DNA of having this as an understanding. And look, at the end of the day, only through accidents we learn. Okay? If life is coasting along, nobody learns. And I think every time, these things happen, people learn. And I can tell you, since yesterday I've been meeting, everybody rolls out one slide on governance, which, by the way, banks have been doing for donkey's years. So it's not something different. I just think you need to make that as part of your design, not as a afterthought or a patchwork. And that's where I think you guys can score.
Awesome. Okay. As soon as you said we learn from accident, I see Abhishek picking up the mic. So do you have to add?
Just add a small point for 60 seconds. I think picking up on what Rajeev you were saying, I think this framework that I heard from a leader who has been in the industry for a long time. And he said, hey, put everything in a 2x2 matrix, which is, are you on the right side of the law? And sometimes the laws are gray. And do you have the right intent for the customers? And we are in an industry where we have to be really, really responsible for our customers, especially in banking and insurance, where the customer is giving you money upfront with some future promise. If the answer is no on both sides, you're dead. If the answer is yes on both sides, you're great. But what do you do if answer is yes on right intent and maybe on the gray side, or you didn't know the law? I think in the long term, the regulator will probably support you. Regulator will guide you. Regulator will support you so that you take corrective actions if you had the right intent. But if you had the wrong intent, you were still doing things in the white area. But if you had the wrong intent, you are dead as a company in the long run. So it's one framework that I thought is very helpful as an entrepreneur to operate with.
Awesome. Archit, I want to come to you, and because you operate in a space which is very, very dynamic, right? Every year, some new regulation is going to come, or rather not regulation, but like new law is going to come, right, around it. So how do you like operate in this space? How do you prepare yourself as a future proof in that space, if you can talk about that?
Yeah, so basically in the space we operate in, right, the government or governments now change things all the time. And they can change, they don't have an annual calendar to change, actually, budgets being one, but they change at the drop of the hat. Like a High Court judgment or a Supreme Court judgment could come out tomorrow and change your opinions, or a notice comes out, a circular comes out. So things happen very fast. The second part is it's a very interesting condition that we find ourselves. Our software and our interpretation of the law into software is the law itself. Like, it's a very high responsibility that we are now assuming, because we have uncovered bugs in the implementation which the government may have done on the software itself. And there is also the difference between a law is announced versus when is it implemented in software. So between that also, that window in itself is now an interesting window that we see. So essentially, software and then AI, I think both are going to get to the point where the law is now encoded in technology, and AI and tech software decides what the law is, even though the intent and the articulate letter of the law may be different or the same. So it's getting very interesting to observe that, and then it is getting very interesting to see if there's infrastructure to support the implementation of the law. And now we do that, and generally we are typically the first in the country to implement any change in the law into software. So our interpretation of the law usually becomes the most common implementation of the law across the country, both in consumer and businesses at this point. And then, since we are the largest and the biggest brand, then most people follow along. And in the software also, we have to allow for multiple implementations because different companies or different individuals may decide that they want to interpret things differently. So all of this is now, this is the sort of muscle that we have had to build, that change can happen at a drop of a hat. Software may have to go into, quote unquote, like all software teams have to rapid response it, stop everything that we do, change the code to accommodate the law, and also software has to be correct, because we can't ship bugs, because we are declaring, the citizens or the taxpayers or the businesses or the customers are declaring facts to their governments. So we have to be very accurate here. So, and we have to have audit trails, we have to have calculation traceabilities and all of that, and ledgers for everything, because only then can we support the change. And so, and we have to also have various interpretations of various time series encoded into our software. So essentially something would have changed, and then the software logic would have changed, and we have to remember various parts of that. So that is where the complexity comes from. It's a very interesting problem that we solve. It's very hard. So we find it hard. I mean, but like that's what we, I think, do for a living.
So going a little bit backwards on that, right? Like you mentioned that sometimes things which get launched, they are also like you are figuring out the bug and implementation of it, right? Is there a pre-work also which goes where you collaborate with the government or like the regulated entity in terms of like what is the right side of implementing this?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think what we've seen is the implementation, the authorities which are implementing the digital stack of India are with every iteration getting very smart and smarter and smarter and compounding on that DNA. So India is very sophisticated on digital rollout, and every year I think India gets smarter as a collective. So what earlier, like some of you may recall when GST came, it was big bang, and there was like very big teething issues, right? Like businesses shutting down, like demonetization level event for the country, and like a lot of pain, right? And after that, in the last few years, it's been relatively smooth. India introduced electronic invoicing. Businesses of a very large scope scale were impacted, and they have to report transactions real time to their government, but there's not much noise. There's not like protests on the streets, and businesses are not like doing dharnas and all of that, right? Because the digital infra is now, they do careful rollouts, they do consultation papers, they try to understand infra limitations. For example, in this one, the government worked with us to roll out an invoice registry where we became the technology provider so that they could handle the scale. So the government is very and the authorities have become very sophisticated in learning how to roll out. So they do a lot of pre-work. And what I've also seen is if they go wrong, if the implementation has kinks, they roll back, or they allow for a lot of clemency, or they allow that they push out deadlines. So I think there's a lot of feedback loops which have gotten tighter, and I think as a country we're getting smarter every day.
Very interesting. I think that's a good thing to like learn, and like I think it's a constant innovation, and it keeps you on the toes always, right? Like very interesting. I want to switch the theme, and like I think something that we covered bits and pieces around partnership. I want to come back on that, right? So Satrajit, you mentioned about how SAP focuses on all these partnerships. It's a multi-geography, multi-country behemoth, right? Like you are working in so many product lines, so many countries, and like I was reading about it, one very interesting use case which I sort of really liked is like how during the COVID times you partnered with the government and you were giving them a solution where, because vaccines have to be very tightly temperature controlled, you were giving them solution where those temperature can be displayed outside the container, and that could have become very easy for them to manage the supply chain throughout end to end, right? So like what are these can you talk about such innovations or some partnerships that you have done like these before? Because like I think ERPs are always treated like a Swiss knife, right? Like your problems would be thrown at you and you are expected to solve it in any way, right? So what are these some interesting partnerships that you are working on toward?
Let me take a step back. I think the way we saw ERP is it's the custodian of your enterprise data, and it has possibly the best knowledge of your end-to-end process. But when you get into the last mile fitment, that's where you cannot do it alone. It differs from market to market, industry to industry. And this wonderful example of COVID time innovation, it came from the fact that we were actually the ERP for the top of 7 pharma companies of the 10. And then we were also the ERP for the people who were transporting these vaccines. So we did have a reach, we did have a, let's say, customer level partnership. So how do you bring that data together within the laws? Because one of the other challenges or other constraints that we face as a business, we are not in the B2C space. So the data is enterprises data. So we are not going to apply a data without anonymizing it and getting patterns of it. So how do you deal with the data? That is another aspect when we are dealing with large organizations across. So coming back to your partnership question, let me take a specific example from my area of SAP Concur. So let's say an employee travels for a corporate reason, and earlier when he was traveling, he used to get a, let's say, $500 USD cash, or he uses his corporate card. But today he would get, let's say, a virtual card. Many companies are giving a virtual card for blocking the hotel payments so that you don't use your credit card balance. Or they are using Forex cards. Or like we are doing with Razorpay, that you are giving the cash advance in a UPI wallet. So these are the use cases which you will not do alone. You are not a financial services provider, so to say. You will build your base country-wise, and then when you come to the end and you reimburse it, then there are companies who do not want to take the burden of reimbursement. So they would outsource that to a payment provider who would pay the invoices on behalf of you, or who would pay the employees on behalf of you, depending on who is claiming that cost. So I think this approach has been that you have the clean core in SAP, then you have our business AI platform, which we call the BTP, and then let the suppliers connect based on their roles and accesses, get the right data and build it together.
Very interesting. So I think the analogy which I can draw from there is like, you have to build a very strong core, and then like an octopus, you have to spread in all directions, right? Like, and these are the partnership which enable you to do it, right? So it's
and you still have to get the data right across, because
that's
not
what you're
everybody
custodian
is
of. Yeah.
talking the same language like
Correct.
human beings. So
Yeah.
that's
Very interesting. Abhishek, I want to come to you and ask a very interesting question, right? So I was reading through some stats, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, right? The insurance penetration today in India sits somewhere around 4%, right? It's extremely low, right? Like if you look at from the start point of view, right? If I draw parallels from, let's say, payment side of it, right? The payment side had like two big moments of like realization, right? Like this was 2016 when UPI happened, and 2016 when demon happened, right? Demonetization and UPI, like that propelled and gave that growth, right? And COVID also played some part of it. What do you think your UPI and demon moments are there in insurance space?
We're waiting for it, yeah. But let me paint the landscape first. So 4% is essentially 4% of the GDP. So spend on insurance as a percentage of GDP. But when we really think of penetration of insurance, I think the right way to look at penetration of insurance is how many people, what percentage of your population have adequate cover. I think that is the right way to look at insurance, because that's how you're measuring that, hey, my population is secured. If you look at the penetration of insurance in India, on paper, we are roughly at 35% penetration. But the true penetration is roughly 20%, which means that 20% of the people have the kind of security through insurance that will take care of the healthcare expenses. So that's where we are. If you look at how countries that have more than 80% kind of penetration, 80% of the population having the right health insurance or life insurance, one trend that we saw was all countries, no exception, all countries had insurance driven by some group mechanism. That group could be the government, the state sponsoring insurance for them. That group could be employer sponsoring insurance for them. None of these countries had a large percentage of double-digit kind of penetration of retail insurance. And the reason is because we, as human beings, we always we always ignore the risk. We don't understand our risk unless it has happened to our own family or some close friend. So I think India will also see very similar trend, which is the retail penetration of insurance will be in single digit, but long term, if India goes well, I think the penetration of insurance will be driven through government and employers. The moment for India was Ayushman Bharat in some ways that really drove the penetration of insurance, but still a long way to go. But the challenge that we have in India is that we are not a rich country. So India as a government can't sponsor insurance for 100% of the population. The best that we could possibly do is maybe 40 to 50% kind of penetration, which means that what happens to that next 45%, assuming that the top 5% people will be able to buy insurance on their own. And that's where my core belief is employers will take the burden of sponsoring insurance for people. What could be that UPI-like moment? I think one of the hopes that I have is what happened in US long time ago, which is US as a government said, hey, any organization that is growing, any organization that is more than 50 people, the employer has to take care of their people. They have to mandatorily provide an insurance. I hope that someday it happens in India. It's just a hope, but we continue to build without that hope. I think the good part is that the awareness of employees and how demanding the employees are becoming, I think that is anyways pushing the barriers in terms of the employer giving insurance to them, but that is our hope that that demon happens sometime.
Interesting. And what was like, if I can just, because COVID impacted a lot of our businesses, at least it propelled FinTech forward, many of them. So what was COVID's impact on insurance tech?
COVID had a tremendous impact, I think, in terms of just awareness, I think I talked about the risk that we perceive. I think we are still not there in terms of perceiving the risk, but that didn't exist before COVID. Possibly 1% of the people would really see the risk, but during COVID, what happened was almost 80% of us would have had some family member, some colleague who had a near-death experience, who also spent a lot at hospital, who possibly had to take an adverse decision of where to get treated, what kind of treatment to have because they didn't have enough money or they didn't have insurance. So it really sparked that thought in the minds of people, even without suffering on their own. It really sparked that thought that, hey, we should think about health, we should think about insurance. So I think in terms of building that awareness about risk that you have with your health and with your life, I think COVID was a big moment.
Awesome. Great to know that. So I know like we are a little bit shooting over the time, but I wanted to do one quick section at the end, right? I wanted to try this out. I wanted to do a quick rapid fire. So I'm going to ask a question which could be a little bit dystopian question, and would want to hear from you, like what do you think about it? Doesn't have to be one word answer, one line answer. You can just like take a half a minute to talk about it, and after that we can quickly close it. Archit, I'm going to come to you first. Do you think AI can replace CA professionals?
I'll let that question sink in for a moment. Yeah, I think 5 years out, probably. So, okay, stepping back, I think.
It's sinking in.
Yeah, it's a googly. Yeah, so it's thrown a googly. So, 5 years out, I think only 10% of the professionals should remain. I'll make a very aggressive statement. 90% of the, India as a place has a lot of manual work that professionals do. I think that should go away. I think it's very low value work. We talk about it we are the largest chartered accountant platform in the country. 30,000 chartered accountant firms operate on the platform, right? Which is like maybe 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 tax firms use our technology, right? I think most of the country does low value work, but that's the story of BPO. That's the story of any business process outsourcing, B2B processes that happen, right? And I think AI will replace many of those use cases. Like, why shouldn't accounting entries happen by converse? You converse with your phone, that I sold this, I bought this, this, and all of it goes into a system of record, everything happens. Why should like human beings be data entry? Why should human beings have to do a lot of tasks which they are doing? And I think that's the question which like India faces with a large BPO industry, right? At a global level, BPO, KPO, right? And that's a question I'm guessing Infosys, Wipro, etc. keep thinking about, right? So that's the first level answer. But the last 10% is judgment. So AI can offer pathways, but judgment, like human beings have to still apply. I think AI will remain co-pilot. Human beings will take judgment and decisions. And so the partner equivalent, like the leaders of the firm still have value and like, but you'll have, like, I think it will take time to evolve. These things take a long time to change. But I think as a profession, many professions, not just chartered accountants, many professions will transform. So I think a lot of manual processes and learning things by doing manual processes and growing in your career, like I think young people will just take a leap and go towards judgment already. So I think that is the change I anticipate. So I think long answer, AI will change everything, but like more co-pilots. And so I think every profession will get rethought. I think every single profession will get rethought. I think part of that is.
Yeah, awesome. So if I can just put it in different words, operating finance is going to slightly come down and strategic finance is going to.
Yeah, so I think that's like, so FinOps, like so we serve the CFO office, so financial operations, which consume 95% of the human beings in a CFO office, right? Can probably be automated. Like I think it'll take a while. I think SAP has shown like they're the path breakers, but I think all of us who try to serve financial operations sort of see that only the breakpoints or the points where it takes strategy or judgment will need humans. I think every other part should get automated.
Awesome. Okay. Rajeev, I'm going to come to you. So what is one threat that you see from fintechs that keeps you awake at night?
So I think, and I will just pose this as your thing. How do you keep a customer first as your North Star, even as you incorporate many other things? So I think, to me, that's the raison d'etre of your success and many others here. And I think that will never change. So if you keep that, see, I mean, all of us exist for doing different things, okay? So I should not assume that I can import that level of agility and connectedness which you can bring to solve a customer problem or anticipate a customer problem. We tend to react, but when we react, we can react at scale and bring a certain level of discipline, maturity, predictability, which younger companies may find it a little bit tougher to do immediately. So I think, to me, it's never going to be a threat or otherwise. It's just recognize what somebody brings, and therefore I see the fact that you run a product day, and I was just joking with Subhash, some of the names you use for your products, and if you just break them, banks offer many of them, but they never thought through that what is the customer's problem you're trying to solve. And so Subhash very valiantly said, banks actually offer 2x of what fintechs do, but I say I don't even know whether we offer 2x. But I think that's the distinction I'll want to maintain, and it'll always remain. And it's not that banks are not adjusting to it, but I think the external market's clock speed, with so much things happening, both risk and opportunity, is always going to drive this internal challenges, either for us or for the fintechs, which is why we believe partnership is the best way of combining the relative strengths.
Awesome. We really admire like your appreciation and how you look at this space. We really admire that. So thank you for that. Satrajit, I'll quickly come to you. So we know SAP as a huge ERP and you build for businesses. If you had to build for consumers, right, what would that product be?
I mean, we introduce ourselves as business AI company of the future. So I think there's a googly in that sense. Let me take it in two parts. One, many of you may know, many of you may not know, we have a consumer product called TripIt Pro. it helps the traveler experience. So you are traveling from Bombay to Delhi, how many hours you are away from the airport, which gate you go to, which belt you go. It is part of the Concur suite also. We give it to our enterprise, but an individual. But if you come back to your original question, I think our strength is helping the businesses run smooth. So in the gig economy, we expect every individual at some point also be a business. You will still have customers, suppliers, a need to prepare your balance sheet and file taxes. So a ERP for an individual would be possibly the first step.
Interesting. Makes sense. I think that's very interesting take on that. Abhishek, I'm coming last but not least to you. I think one of the interesting finding that I had was there's a Mental Act 2018 which came out, which is that mental health is now also included as part of the insurance segment, right? It was a new learning for me. What are more such blind spots that you see which are going to come over the next 5 years?
Generally, the problem in insurance has been the reverse, which is as consumers, when we are buying insurance, we think everything is covered. We think, hey, we buy insurance and next day I can go and get a cosmetic surgery. I can do some weight reduction. Everything is covered. So we have the reverse problem of it's not that, hey, you don't know something is covered. It's that, hey, you should know that, hey, these are things that are not covered. But what are things that will get, what are more blind spots? I think healthcare is moving at a much faster pace than insurance. The innovations that are happening in healthcare in terms of the kind of surgeries, the kind of treatments that are available, insurance is not able to catch up a lot of times. They're not able to understand what is the risk involved, what is the price involved, and they're not able to price it, and hence they put a blanket cover saying, hey, and it's very interesting, they call it modern treatments. They just put a bunch of treatments that they don't understand, and they put it under a category of modern treatments, and they'll say, hey, that this is not covered, or this is covered just under this kind of limitation, just because they don't understand it. And I think that is one big blind spot that even consumers have, and then insurance companies don't understand it. And I think that's one of the areas, that's just one example, I think, where we're going to see a massive change in terms of a demand from the consumers first, and then the insurance companies understanding it and saying, hey, yeah, this should be done, and this should be done in the right way for the consumers.
Awesome, awesome. No, thank you so much. I think amazing insights. While as much I'm enjoying to keep hosting this session, I think we'll have to honor the time also. Should we be going for the audience question, or do we not have time? Okay, so I think we have to head for lunch. We are already holding the audience back. So thank you so much, panelists. I think really loved hosting this. It's an honor to host you all. Thank you so much.